forward a complete package of the renewable energy paradigm. We also have brokerage activities. So these is basically bridging the gap between finance people, the people with the investment capability, and the people with the projects, and how we breach that gap to make projects financially ready or investment grade ready, and to be able to be implemented. We also have a couple of demonstration projects. These are now the first one is in Sumba, and what we want to do there is basically use it as a proof of concept on a lot of the business models that we're discussing, and there was a session, or there is going to be a session on that on Friday, on some of the business models that we see are implemented currently, and what are the alternatives and some recommendations to be able to accelerate the development. This demonstration project is working directly with the community. We want to electrify a small community called MENTARI, and bring forward some hybrid PV and battery system and implement it there. So it's not only a proof of concept on the business model, but also looking at the technology, and I'll talk about it later, how resilient the technology is to these kind of shocks, in terms of economic shock or in terms of a pandemic. And finally, something that brings everything together, brings all of the stakeholders and all of the key parties, is the collaboration and networking. And this has also, as you can imagine, has changed significantly how it was envisioned at the beginning of 2019 and how we planned it today. And so there are key positive and negative aspects of how impact COVID has in terms of communication and collaboration. We'll go through that also in the following slides. And of course, there's some cross-cutting themes across all of the strands, and one of them is gender and inclusion. The other one is how energy can be used as productive, as a productive use for the low income or for economic development, financial development, and green finance. And what I want people to take out is that MENTARI's objectives are different from other programs in the past. On one hand, it's a very broad, geographically broad objective. So we are focusing on Eastern Indonesia, but we're looking at the whole Indonesia for policy support for brokerage activities. We're looking at it also from a very macro scale or high-level scale of investment. We're thinking about the projects that are being implemented. So it's those multi-million-dollar deals to be able to get those projects up and running. But we're also thinking about the small guy, the person that is in the community, that the impact that those few extra kilowatts of electricity might have in their lives. They might bring their kids to school. They might be able to improve their agricultural practices because they have now a solar water pump. And all of this development, we're trying to look at it on a very broad scale. And so this is why we have a very diverse and highly professional team to work on it. We also have not only the British Embassy leading the project, but also we have several key consortium partners implementing it, where they shine in their different abilities and different capacities. In terms of the policy strand, I'm going to go quickly over what we're trying to do. We're basically trying to deliver demand-driven and flexible assistance to public stakeholders, mainly PLN and the Government of Indonesia, whether it's MEMR or other ministry, to be able to adapt to the current situation. And that has been the key concept of this, or is going to be the key concept of this presentation, and has been the key something that we need to keep in mind throughout the whole year, is that during the uncertain times that we live, in which we don't know not only what regulation is going to happen, but also what's going to be, if our offices are going to be open, if people are going to be available, if there's a shift on focus. That kind of adaptive programming has been key for us to be able to adequately support these kind of initiatives and these kind of projects. And considering that this is a very long project in terms of 4 years, and in terms of also on the scale of our scope of work, we are very much open to these kind of requests or focus of activities where we see the most impact, to focus our resources. So we have 3 main areas, of course. We have on-grid recommendations. So this is mainly those projects that are connected to the grid. How does that the current regulation fit in to those projects, and how can we actually support better, bigger projects? The off-grid recommendation, because this is a total different line of work or a line of thinking, how can both PLN and the government of Indonesia support off-grid developments in particularly areas that are not yet connected to the grid? And of course, PLN assistance, because PLN plays such a key role, and they have their own motivations and intrinsic push forward towards their own development, that we have a specific focus again on PLN and how we can move them towards a renewable energy transition. From the brokerage activity, we saw how COVID has actually influenced the financial environment, not only from private institutions and financiers, but also from project developers. How has this whole situation had repercussions and an impact way beyond COVID, and also financially, but also on the ability of a lot of the financiers to be able to reach that finance and to be able to have the projects ready. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, and that is huge impact on our work and on the medium term, on the low carbon transition that Indonesia is looking forward. So we have three lines of activities. One is on the supply side, one is on the demand, and finally to reach the gap, as I mentioned previously, of matchmaking these two activities. And finally, the demonstration project. We want to be able to incentivize that the projects that we have right now and the business models that we're doing are considering gender inclusion, are considering the community, and are actually pushing towards productive uses of energy. So we're kind of figuring out what is the current status of off-grid development and giving a lot of input into and thinking into these kinds of situations and constraints. And collaboration and networking is kind of bringing it all together, as I mentioned. How do we make sure that the efforts that we're doing, that the information that we're bringing up, the knowledge that we're sharing is effective and is really used in the way that we want everybody to be able to use this knowledge, and we want to be able to collaborate not only with the government and PLN, but also with different stakeholders, private companies, other donors, and bringing it forward in times of COVID. It has been a challenge, but also quite successful considering the current situation. And again, we're mainstreaming gender and inclusion throughout all of our strands. So we have people that are dedicated for that, to make sure that that is considered in their deliverables, in their products, in their activities, which so far we consider that, again, considering that there has been budget cuts, for example, to certain activities from the government related to women and other things, we have been quite successful in kind of bringing it all together and showing how gender inclusion plays a key role in these trends. Now, some of the lessons learned. This is the main part of running a project for 1 year. How have we seen the development? Where do we look forward? And how key challenges we see with COVID. So I'm going to divide this in all the strands and how has that impacted our work, and what workarounds have we had, what impacts, and what we see as new activities, for example, coming forward. So for example, as with many global and national aspects, the year-long implications of COVID has impacted our initial planning, and this is going to continue happening until a vaccine, until the situation is completely handled in Indonesia. We're going to see a different, more uncertain financial environment. The regulatory framework is going to be shifting, changing, and within discussion. So how have we actually brought forward our activities to be able to be managed under this situation? So in terms of policy strand, we understand that, as with many other governments, not only in Indonesia, economic recovery is key. So the main priority for this is the economic recovery of the country. So how do we package, or how do we present renewable energy transition as part of that recovery? And this is, again, looking back to adaptive programming with our donors, which is the British Embassy. We've had a lot of collaborative ideas and activities that we look into that adaptation and that kind of shared goals with the government and with other stakeholders, and how best we can support the different activities. So it is a very flexible program in that sense, and that has helped us to adapt to the current situation. And of course, we've also noticed how this is also touching on the brokerage side, but how, let's say, vulnerable the current energy matrix is in terms of adaptive demand, if there is a lower priority or less demand from the population, how vulnerable that is for PLN's balance sheet and for the general development of the communities. So we're really pushing forward a least cost planning approach to be incentivized as a solution, but we're also looking at the whole paradigm on how, or the whole new energy paradigm on how things need to change, regulations need to adapt to be able to become more flexible in terms of crisis and in terms of economic recovery. From the brokerage strand, as I mentioned, the financial environment is different. We saw yesterday, for those of you that were in the presentation on the roundtable, how PLN's goal is right now looking at least cost approach, is looking at ensuring their balance sheet and almost in a way ensuring their overall financial performance. Again, considering renewable energies, but how does the less demand over the 2019 year impact their economic projections and their demand projections? So again, the way that we've packaged it is that, for example, lowering costs, push towards efficiency and rural electrification has a place for renewable energy, and how that can actually be beneficial to PLN. So we're actually helping them now, for example, with their off-grid systems that are diesel-based systems. How can that be actually implemented towards a hybrid PV diesel or PV battery system with huge economic impacts for their operating costs and overall their bottom line. And in terms of financial institutions and project developers, there is that gap of innovative financing solutions during this COVID situation. Having projects that are investment ready will be key for the upcoming years, and that is something that we're trying to help those project developers reach that goal. Making that matchmaking again has been quite difficult in this COVID situation. We cannot travel to the project sites. There is limited interest from key financial institutions, but it also has exacerbated the uncertain regulatory framework. So how does that impact our overall goal of brokerage has been a challenge. From the demo project strand, COVID activities have definitely been, or COVID influence has definitely been impacted on our activities. So we've had surveys, we've had FGDs and workshops, and so the stringent COVID measures that we've taken have definitely paid off. We have no COVID case, and those measures have been quite stringent, but we make sure that project activities have gone forward. And also we're thinking about the system. If a new pandemic hits, or if during the pandemic has not been properly handled over the next upcoming months, then what kind of technological system needs to be implemented, whether it's automation, control, or monitoring, to be able to ensure that we can have the necessary quick response to be able to keep delivering the electricity needs without having to fly somebody in to do maintenance, or to be able to know what's the status real time on the project. So that has been a key focus on the technology side that we've seen. It has been again strongly impacted by COVID and the situation. And on the collaboration and networking strand, all of you have experienced, we're doing this session online, which ConEx has normally been a face-to-face meeting. So how has this impacted our collaboration and networking has been an issue. Sometimes it's a positive way. For example, meetings that are involved with many stakeholders, most people can achieve, because most people can arrive to an online meeting, whether they're far away or whether they have other activities. They can come in and have that meeting, which probably face-to-face is not that easy. But also some negative impacts. For example, a lot of the discussion of informal communication that happens between donors and the government is more difficult to have in these kind of situations with just a meeting and a presentation. And of course, all of you are quite aware of it. But how do we tackle that has been a challenge. And I think overall we've done a good work, but also it's one of the themes moving forward that we need to be very, very aware of. And moving forward, the consideration of how to take advantage of these IT technologies whether the pandemic is handled, whether we can go back to a more normal situation, which meetings can be face-to-face and which one will be online to bring in more people will be a key message. So I think a lot of the institutions that are handling that or that are looking at these ways of online and offline work are actually thinking, and we're also quite conscious of that in the future. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll just go through some of the key lessons. I mentioned this before, adaptive programming is key. We have a 4-year project. We don't know what's going to happen next year. We barely know what's going to happen in the next few months with the vaccine and with the economic development. So that kind of flexibility and ways of thinking is key, and we've been very much supported by the British Embassy on this. And kind of that collaboration between not only between the strands and the different activities, as I mentioned, there is a different level of the strands in terms of the impact and what we're trying to do, but also between the different stakeholders and implementing partners. Finally, we found COVID adaptation to be possible. It requires a lot of risk adaptation and risk measures, but also outside the box thinking. We need to look at it from a new perspective, and both in all the strands and in all of our activities, COVID has been an issue, but it has been handled. Moving forward, we'll see what happens. But it definitely is something that has impacted the project or the planning of the project that was initially envisioned. And finally, the technical coordination between donors can ensure effectiveness of both parties' activities. We've seen how different donors are doing different kind of work, and MENTARI being such an overarching and with such a broad scope, we really need to incentivize the collaboration between the different donors. We cannot be only in our own bubble. And that has been something that having 3 different consortium partners or 3 different consortium partners implementing on site, and also the British Embassy from a more diplomatic point of view has kind of incentivized that discussion and made us more aware of where we are and where different donors stand. So that is my presentation for today. If you have any other questions, here is a list of contacts. We also have the booth where you can actually contact different people directly, and this presentation is available there. So thank you very much, and that's all for me today.
Thank you, Mr. Julio, for your presentation. Maybe if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to ask some questions, you can contact them through their booth in the UK Embassy Pavilion. Once again, thank you to Mr. Julio and the ladies and gentlemen for attending this business presentation. See you on the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.